Hello, welcome to Frankfurt Kids. My name is Henrik and I'm part of the Frankfurt Kids team.
Hi, my name is Nina and I'm also part of the Frankfurt Kids team. Frankfurt Kids is a place of the Frankfurter Buchmesse for international children books publishing and illustration. Frankfurt Kids is collaborating with a lot of different children book organizations, German and international, who are usually organizing their events on the Frankfurter Buchmesse physically, and this year it will be all digital.
As we can't be in a fair hall this year, which is sad, but it's just the way it is, we prepared a little digital event in cooperation with IBBY, the International Board Books for Young People. We want to present you some of the topics that are important for us right now and we hope are important for you as well. I guess you all know IBBY, but just in case you don't, which I can't imagine, IBBY is an international organization of people working in the children book industry. They are an organization of people over a lot of countries that are taking care of topics that are important for children. As you know, IBBY is taking care of social political aspects in children books literature. They have sections in many countries. And they are promoting things like the silent books, books that don't have words, so children from a lot of different countries can understand them and use them as a communication tool. And they have special programs for, in example, for children with disabilities. And they do books for children that are in crisis, like in coming from a war territory, that were witnesses to natural disasters and other circumstances that are influencing their lives deeply. IBBY is doing also the Hans Christian Andersen Award, one of the biggest awards in children books literacy. And they also are doing the Children Book Day each year, which is the 2nd of April. Each year another country is the host of the International Children Book Day. This year it was Slovenia, and the host is always picking a topic that they think is important and promotes this topic via a text and an illustration from their country, which IBBY takes care of and brings it to the world.
So in the first part of this digital event, we will learn something about the topic Children in Crisis, which is a project from IBBY. It will be a discussion between Patsy Aldana, who is the president of the IBBY Foundation, and Liz Page, who is the executive director of IBBY.
Hello everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today, this afternoon, to talk about IBBY's support of children in crisis. I will be talking to Patsy Aldana, who is the current chair of the IBBY Trust. Patsy has done all the jobs in IBBY. She started off on the IBBY Executive Committee, and then she was the vice president. And then for 4 years, she acted as IBBY president. And then after that, she was the chair of the Hans Christian Andersen Award jury twice. She's now the chair of the IBBY Trust, as I said. In 2010, Patsy was awarded the Order of Canada for her work with the freedom to read and children reading everywhere. So, Patsy, I would like to welcome you to this section and talk through with you what IBBY does. So I will leave it. I will give you the question now. We have many projects, and we'll start now with IBBY in Canada and their amazing project for reader and refugees. Patsy.
Well, later at the end, we'll talk about how it is that IBBY manages to do this much with so little resources. But IBBY Canada realized that we're always thinking about the rest of the world, but in fact, in Canada, there are a number of refugee children who have come in from all over the world, many from Africa, some via the United States, even though in theory that is not legal. They can in fact come. And when they come to Canada, they are given medical care a place to live, and legal support while they're in the process of seeking refugee status. And they tend to be housed in refugee shelters, which are sometimes big hotels where a whole family might be in one room, or specific refugee centers. These children go to school, but of course, many of them do not speak English when they come. And so we realized that this is an ideal situation for bibliotherapy, which is what IBBY has been doing for many years now, reading to children who are in a crisis situation, in difficulty. These children, of course, they're housed, they're fed, et cetera, but they are at a loss. They've come to a new place. Some of them have come from refugee shelters in places like Syria, Lebanon, Lebanon, from all over the Middle East and from Africa. And so volunteers go on every Saturday and some evenings after school and read to groups of children, sometimes to individual children, sometimes to whole families. Whole families have liked doing this. They have been collecting books that work well and trying to figure out which books are the books that the kids like the best. And we conduct what is traditional to IBBY, which is a trusted adult that you meet every week or every other day or whatever the possibility is, who comes and reads to you and talks to you about your experiences as you want to. And the kids do get to pick the books that are being read. Older kids sometimes read to younger kids. This project was ongoing. We had there's one in Manitoba, there was some in Montreal, there was a number in Toronto. And of course, the sad thing is that when COVID came, we had to stop going. Currently, they're working on trying to do an individualized project where a family could say, I would like to have someone come to read virtually to my child once a week, let's say. Very complicated to arrange, but that is the current hope, how we're going to do that. And I've got to say, this has been done with absolutely no funding at all. Donations of books, help of the Toronto Public Library, but by our wonderful volunteers. And these kids have really, really benefited. The people who run the shelters say it's been an excellent program, and the parents really love it. So this is something that we hope to continue. If and when COVID ever ends, then we will go back, which of course is the most desirable thing to see, the coziness of reading together. But for now, as I say, we're trying to figure out a way to do this virtually. So I think this project could be duplicated in any country that has refugee populations in it, where they can be found. And the refugee centers, as I say, the people that run these places have been extremely happy to have us do this.
Thank you, Patsy. That's an excellent project with the help of IBBY Canada. Now we move further south to El Salvador.
The El Salvador project, the Biblioteca de los Sueños, was started by a wonderful poet, Salvadoran poet, indigenous person. He's a Pipil Indian, which are related to Nahuas. They're not Maya. They came down from Mexico or to Salvador directly. He went to the United States as a refugee in the 80s, became a very well-known Spanish and English language poet. He's a very charismatic person. Decided to go home to Salvador and to create a network of libraries. One was in his house, in his backyard, which his cousin helped him to build. One was he went every Saturday to the market, and these are in very difficult parts of the city of San Salvador. As you know, there's a very serious gang problem there. One of the drivers of refugee status, why people leave Salvador, is the incredible gang problem. And then he decided to build a library in his hometown, which is an indigenous village called Santo Domingo. And he got the help of the town, the church, et cetera, et cetera. Now, of course, with COVID, he's had to stop. The schools are not coming to his house anymore, and the market is not available. But he is now bringing back the library in Santo Domingo in his village. They are bringing in children, very few at a time. He's trained all these young volunteers to do reading promotion in this village. There's a huge amount of support from the church, as I say, and the village elders, adults in the village, etc. And he's paying, these children are being paid to do reading, the older children to do the reading promotion. So they have a real motivation, and it's a benefit to them. So now they're trying to do is get kids to borrow books from this library, which they hadn't been doing before. And these are very high quality books. A lot of them donated and paid for by US librarians that have sent these books down, and older people learning to read to kids, etc. And now they're having a contest for who borrows and reads the most books. So to bring the kids back into contact with the books, but they can't be doing it in person at the moment. So our hope, of course, as everywhere, is that we will soon be able to go back to being able to be together in a space and read out loud. But in the meanwhile, you can see he's talking in a microphone to bring people to the library so they can continue to get the kind of benefit they were. I mean, a lot of these, they go to school, but a lot of them are probably semi-illiterate, but this program can really change their lives. And this is a very important Indigenous village and a source of people leaving as well. And these are his great young volunteers that just love being part of this project. And as I say, they get a stipend for doing this. And this is Jorge himself, the initiator and instigator of all these incredible libraries in Salvador. And IBBY has been a very proud supporter. And there is an IBBY section in Salvador. And then one of the great things about Salvador is that Jorge has been so good at getting the government, the major cultural people, etc., to support him, so that he's not a marginal figure in Salvador, he's a hero. And the National Library has been extremely supportive. So that is our Salvadoran project, which is ongoing. And I think really important, especially when you think of the social situation there.
Thank you, Patsy. And now we come to one of our newest projects. As we all know, there was about 3-4 weeks ago, there was an enormous explosion in Beirut, and this caused so much damage, so much hardship, and so much sadness. So we are helping IBBY Lebanon, and Patsy will tell you a little bit about this project.
Well, the first thing to say about IBBY Lebanon is that they're one of our oldest sections and one of our most magnificent sections. They started, Julinda Abu Nasser, the founder, started reading to children in basements and shelters during bombing in the first big Lebanese wars, which, as you know, went on forever. After the war in southern Lebanon, Julinda created a whole curriculum using books, using trade books and picture books on how to recognize anger, etc., a conflict resolution curriculum, which was then adopted by the then Lebanese government. And so we can always know, and then they've had an incredible project working with Syrian children who, as you know, in Lebanon, they're not allowed to go to school. So these children are just floating around, and there's a lot of Syrian refugees in Lebanon, really a lot. It's one of the large countries, and with very little infrastructure to deal with this. Reading to these kids. Then comes this incredible bomb. School libraries devastated. Within about 2 weeks or a week and a half, they are starting a project in rebuilding these school libraries. And you can imagine, I mean, here they are in this country which has had so much violence, where the leadership is universally acknowledged to be a complete disaster. Individuals from Lebanon coming together to do work for these children who have just had so many terrible things happen to them. This is a very ambitious project, which is also being supported by UNESCO, by the Bibliothèque Nationale in France. They've got engineers, interior designers, and they're choosing libraries that they're going to rebuild, fix up, bring new collections in. Each one could cost from $7,000 to $20,000. They're already working to rebuild physically these spaces. UNESCO is going to document this entire project, and university students are supporting. IBBY is making a 30,000 euro contribution. UNESCO is contributing 9,000. And as I say, they're working away already. They have a plan. It's incredible how you can come out of such a totally terrible situation and do something so positive. I think we could all take a lesson from that. Whining and miserable though we are in this terrible situation of COVID, you can see that people do something, it really makes a difference, and it gives you a reason to live too. And of course, the most important thing is the children are desperately needing to come back to some kind of normality and to have a good school library. And it's also a component for training teachers to work with kids in this circumstance. So, and IBBY Lebanon, as I say, has so much experience working with children in crisis. They are one of our most experienced sections. Really, we need to support this project with everything we've got. I just think it's so admirable that they could come together so quickly to come up with something this positive. So, great project.
Thank you, Patsy. It's really very impressive, I have to say. They are very active and very impressive. Now, how do we afford all this?
Well, how do we, well, we have a few more projects.
We have
Don't
2 more
forget
projects.
them. Salvador, they continue to, I mean, I'm sure you are all aware of the fact that the Central American children have continued to leave. Things are terrible in Central America. In the Northern Triangle, Honduras, whose president's brother has been convicted of being a drug dealer. In Guatemala, terrible drought where people have not been able to grow corn, which is their main 5 years now because of the climate change. The violence in Salvador and Honduras, gang violence. And so children continue to come. They come up through Mexico, which is no longer welcoming or really helping them. The Mexican IBBY is trying to create 2 new centers specifically for these children. One in Tapachula, which is the main city once you cross the Guatemalan border, which is how they're all coming into Mexico to help receive them. There's nobody working with the children specifically. There are refugee centers, but the funding for them has been cut back tremendously by the current Mexican government. And then they're also working with people who, there are charitable groups in Mexico who work with migrants and with refugees. And so they're creating a new center in Tijuana, which is one of the main crossing points into the United States. Again, using reading and books, and that's with an existing shelter. So those projects are just evolving right now. And of course, as always, all these things are much more difficult to do during the time of COVID. So that is a sort of a new project that we're really hoping will take off and will get a lot of support from people, especially the IBBY Reforma project, which was working more with the children once they got to North America. That project is almost on hold because it's most of the children have been sent back to the northern, to northern Mexico to await their hearings. Many of them are being returned to Central America with COVID on airplanes with no one to receive them or to help them when they get there. It's a criminal situation, frankly. And IBBY Reforma group in the US is trying everything they can, but again, it's much more difficult to have access to anyone under the current situation. Children in Gaza, ongoing tragedy. IBBY, as you probably know, has 2 libraries, mainly funded by Catherine Patterson, the great American writer. 2 libraries, they were destroyed in the war with Israel a few years ago. They've been rebuilt, and children use those libraries and depend on them. But as you know, the Palestinian situation has deteriorated the situation in Gaza. They are more cut off than ever. And we must not forget that they are there. These libraries, Liz and I went to visit them. We could see the parents came to thank us for these libraries, which helped these children to go somewhere after school, so they're not caught up in street fights and battles and struggles between different political parties. They're an essential part of these children's lives. And if these children are living in an open air camp, they're locked in, they cannot leave. And it's really important never to forget them because they are being forgotten, I think. It's just an ongoing project that where we really can say that we've been, I don't know how many years is it now, 8 years that we've had these libraries, Liz, approximately 10
longer. Yeah.
Longer. And they're really, as I say, essential. And they're a model for what can be done in Gaza, because speaking of people that have been abandoned, that's the case there. So now how do we pay for all of this? Apart from Catherine Patterson, the great Catherine Patterson. Well, as you can imagine, we have 81 national sections around the world. They pay the dues which support the IBBY office. And of course, many of them are in a very difficult situation. They live on donations, depending on the country, how they're funded. But IBBY of all times, more than ever, we need our central office, the magnificent Liz Page, who's here, the executive director. So one of the projects we've come up with is Scarves for IBBY. We're selling these great Hans Christian Andersen winning artists have donated original pieces of art, out of which we have made at Nami Island, who is our sponsor in Korea for the Andersen Award, created these scarves out of the art made by these great 10 Hans Christian Andersen winning illustrators from all over, from Iran to Brazil to Russia to Switzerland to the Czech Republic and the US, Quentin Blake. They have made such beautiful art, and these scarves are available for $200 US. They're selling quite fast, but there's still left, some are left, and we urge people to go on to the IBBY website, Scarves for IBBY, and buy some of these scarves, because when people receive them, I've seen people get them with they are ecstatic. And this is our major fundraising effort for our whole organization, for IBBY itself. And with this great art, as one of the people I know who's an art director said, how many times you get to wear art around your neck? And I'm wearing a Queta Pachowska, and Liz is wearing Albertine.
Albertine, yeah.
Our newest designer, who's our brand new.
Made out of silk.
They're all out of silk. They're beautiful. They're exquisite. This is from Roger Mello in Brazil. They're very gorgeous, these scarves. And I urge you to support IBBY by buying these scarves. $200 US. It's not, you don't often get a limited edition. There's only 50 copies of each of these scarves. So please rush to the IBBY website and go in and look at the one and get the one you like. And of course, you can also donate to the specific projects. If you go into the IBBY website, you can look at the specific projects. If you want to donate to Lebanon, let's say, or Gaza or Salvador, you can find a way to do that on the IBBY website as well. Any more advice for people how to donate, Liz?
No, it's all there. We make it as simple as possible, and we take all money from anywhere. So we're very flexible in this, and we're very pleased to be able to help. And all the money we take goes to the projects.
For the specific project donations, we don't keep any funding back.
We don't.
Scarves for IBBY is to help us exist, but the individual donations to the individual projects, they go straight to that project.
We're very fortunate to be able to do that. We have such a small infrastructure that we can manage to do that. So every $10 that you donate to a project, $10 goes to that project. So thank you very much, Patsy. And if anybody has any questions, they can always contact us through the IBBY website. And we hope to see you in person next year in Frankfurt. So until then, thank you very much for watching, and stay well.
Take care.
Thank you. So now the next subject is about Black Lives Matter. It's a discussion between Junko Yokota, the jury president this year of the Hans Christian Andersen Award, and its winner of this year, Jacqueline Woodson.
Black Lives Matter became a topic again this year, as you all know, but racism and equality are important topics in children's books all over the last years. And we are quite happy that Junko and Jacqueline are talking about it now.
Hey everyone, it's so good to be here. I wish I was actually in Frankfurt, but I guess this is the next best thing, and we're healthy and safe. So I'm so glad to be talking to you, Junko.
Yeah, and you too, Jackie. So I distinctly recall the date on which I met you, which, I'm so fortunate to meet many authors and illustrators that it's not usually that memorable. But in June of 1994, I swooned on an elevator when I looked at your name tag and saw that Jacqueline Woodson, the person whose work I'd been admiring. Now, I'm a Japanese immigrant to the United States. Mm-hmm. I was living in Iowa at the time. And reading your work that is so strikingly of a specific background, a specific voice, a specific set of stories that you wanted to say. In 1994, you had finished your first 3 books about Mason, and you had just published, yes, I'm fumbling now.
Is it Melanie's?
This one. If I hadn't meant to tell you this, young adults.
Yes.
Your voice resonated widely for an audience very different from your own.
Mm-hmm.
From an author's perspective, what do you think about in terms of your audience that writes in ways that resonate across many, many backgrounds?
It's interesting. I first want to talk about that meeting because I remember it because it was the first time I felt like my work was crossing over, because I remember I was like, wow, here is this small Asian woman, and she knows my work. I had known my work, had spoke to audiences of color, of Black and brown audiences, but I hadn't realized that it had begun to move outside of those experiences, and mirroring the experience of people who look like me. And so when you got on that elevator and said, you're Jacqueline, read my name tag, I think I kind of had this moment of, whoa, someone knows me and knows my work. So and it was very early. I that hadn't happened before. So that's why it stays with me. I think the thing about the work is that it's very, very specific, right? When you look at something like I Hadn't Meant to Tell You This, that's a book about two very specific girls, one white and poor, one Black and well off, and their experiences being raised by their fathers, and both their experiences losing their mothers. And I think in some way, shape, or form, even though it's a very specific experience, we all know what it means to have lost. We all know what that ache feels like. We all know, hopefully, what deep love feels like. And so I think the reader meets me halfway in our shared experiences. And I think that's the case for so much of my writing. I am talking about very specific characters, and at the same time, I am talking about the universal experience that every human knows, and hopefully knows at some point in their life.
Mm-hmm. So I understand what you mean by that, because that universality of human experiences, you're right, crosses over, but you carry us with the ways in which you introduce characters we may not have met in person before, which lends itself very easily to this idea that your books are international in scope, in that these human experiences can be felt and understood across not just cultural lines within the United States, but certainly across international lines as well. Years later, I asked you to talk about tough topics, and I brought you to a conference and asked you to speak about it. And you asked me, what are tough topics anyway? And I thought, but Jackie, you said, yes, you talk about them. And now you're asking me what in the world tough topics are. But the idea that you write about these topics, and yet you don't want the world to consider them to be tough. Can you speak a little bit to that idea?
Yes. Well, when we're experiencing them, they're not tough, right? They're something we have to get through. And I think especially for young people, they're not seeing their lives as other in any way. It's just their life. They have nothing to compare it to. They don't have a better life to compare it to. They don't have a worse life to compare it to. It's just that life that they're in. And so, and in that life, there are bumps that they have to get over, and there's their resilience, and there's the hope that's in the narrative. So when someone says writing about a kid whose dad is in prison is a tough topic, I'm like, no, it's just a topic, right? It's just something that happens especially when we look at our country and its high rate of mass incarcerations, right? So it's a very American experience in that way. And then it's also an international experience in that everyone, again, knows what it means to have to go away from somebody, to live far away from somebody, to see someone leave a family, or whatever the topic is. And so, again, I don't think of them as issue-driven books or tough topics. It's just life, and it's a life that so many people all over the world know. So, and I think for me, I think it was hard to think about them as tough topics, because I didn't want young people to see their lives as other, as someone looking down on them and seeing them in some kind of way other than they see everyone's life. Because I mean, the wealthiest kid in the world, the poorest kid in the world, they all have struggles, and the way that we get to the conversation between them is to highlight the similarities in the struggle.
That's true. You know, you helped me learn so much that day about this idea that we don't separate out, as you say, what's tough, but rather, in fact, normalize the idea of us facing life issues in many ways. So I appreciated that idea. But that brings us to the topic that the book fair has asked us to talk about today, which is on the topic of what's happening with this idea of Black Lives Matter. To give a very brief background to our international audience, Black Lives Matter was started in 2013 with Trayvon Martin's murderer being acquitted for his action as a police person. And through this, the Black Lives Matter has activated a political and social movement to talk about nonviolent ways of being civil disobedience, and to protest against the ways in which people have allowed police brutality and racially motivated violence to continue, particularly against Black people. And in recent times, we have seen that Black Lives Matter has become something that is recognized more widely in national and international spheres because of the unfortunate fact that although this was started in 2013, we're facing this increasingly in more public ways, in ways that we recognize as being not only about the horrors of police brutality, but even in ways that say a person on a walk in Central Park in New York City who's birding can be a victim of racial not just discrimination, but of racial actions that are in fact very much denying the humanness of an individual. And I've really thought a lot about how this Black Lives Matter is something that we as a world should consider. Would you speak a little bit about what it means to you as a person, as an individual?
Yeah, I will start by talking about If You Come Softly. And writing that book in the 1990s. And it's the story of a love affair between a Black guy and a white girl. And they fall in love. And one of the early things his dad says to him is never run in a white neighborhood. And it's a conversation that Black and brown mothers have with their children all the time. It's one of the ways in which we try to save our children's lives, because the history of Black and brown people running in white neighborhoods and being assumed to be robbing someone or a threat somehow is a very scary and very old history in this country. And in the case of If You Come Softly, Jeremiah gets killed by cops in a case of mistaken identity. So that book was published early 90s, mid 90s. And when it was published, one of the pushbacks I got about it was that would never happen. So, and it was before social media. It was before people outside of Black and brown communities knew what people inside Black and brown communities knew, that there was police brutality, that Black and brown bodies were constantly getting beaten and killed by police. And so fast forward to past social media, when we see all of this happening in real life on videos, and the country beginning to awaken to it. And the group Black Lives Matter, which very few years ago was considered a terrorist organization, became what it was, got recognized as what it has always been, an organization trying to keep Black and brown bodies alive, essentially, right? And trying to call attention the fact that this slaughtering is happening in our communities and has been happening since the existence of policing, right? It started with caterpillars. It started, with enslavement. People were policed by overseers, and then people were policed by people who were sent out to catch escaped enslaved people, but also then bounty hunters who were people who were free Blacks and putting them back into enslavement. And then during the 1920s, 30s, 40s, with all the lynchings that happened. And I think about how Ida B. Wells went to Europe to talk about the lynchings because people in the United States weren't hearing her. And it wasn't until the UK shined a light on what was happening in the US that the US is like, oh shoot, other people are watching, we need to act, right? And I think that's what's happening now with the Black Lives Matter movement. It's becoming this very international movement. People outside of this country are seeing and caring about what's happening to Black and brown bodies in this country. As a result, people are painting it as, Black people being crazy and rioting and looting and tearing up their own stuff and bombing, and which is a smear campaign, right? Which is the same thing that happened with Black folks in the 20s and 30s, right after Reconstruction, when white folks started getting upset about Black wealth being built, right? So we had the bombing in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We had Chicago 1990. We had all these ways in which white folks came in and destroyed it. And, we see what's happening now post the Obama presidency in terms of, there's this rage in this country. White folks are really mad and all of this stuff is going on. So I think when we look at the Black Lives Matter movement, it's the present day civil rights movement. And it's young people. The thing that makes me excited is that it's young people and it's young people of all colors, right? It's not just Black and brown bodies, but it's white bodies, it's Asian bodies, it's Latinx bodies coming together to say, we will not pass this down to our grandchildren, right? This stops here. This racism stops here. This genocide stops here. Police brutality stops here. I am excited about that. I am excited that I am looking toward a future in which I will be the ancestor to young people who will go, like, what? Wait, people didn't get along because of the color of their skin. I remember with my own son, we were watching the movie about Freddie Mercury, Queen, and Bohemian Rhapsody, right? And and Freddie Mercury was gay, but was closeted. He couldn't talk about it. And I was watching it with my kids, and they're like, "Well, what are you talking about? He can't talk about being gay. Like, what? That's like saying I don't have eyes." I mean, they were so stunned that there was a period where people had shame about their sexual orientation and they couldn't fathom it, right? And I look forward to that day happening around this construct of race.
That would be something for all of us to hope for.
Yeah.
What I've also found very intriguing in this day, in 2020, compared to some earlier times, is the ideas have been expressed by Ibram X. Kendi in How to Be an Anti-Racist. And I think that these notions of complicity has been an important aspect of people becoming aware, as you said, of leading towards a generation in which we recognize that complicity is in fact problematic, and that one cannot be, as has been stated in the past, I'm not racist, and that this notion of I'm not racist is not in fact a true one. So reading widely has been a way for me to be able to begin to understand experiences that are not my own. Not my own race, not my own background, but certainly, as we said in the very beginning of this conversation, something for all humanity to consider. And I think that we're very fortunate that we live in a time in which young people are aware, interested, and wanting to take action. And for all of us who believe in the power of literature to be able to express our innermost feelings, to begin to understand a little bit of what each other is experiencing, to bring those feelings into what we know ourselves. I do see that reading books that are at the adult level, reading books that are at the young adult level, reading picture books for all of us brings literature into a very active role for helping us to see the world more directly than we might have experienced otherwise. I'd like to ask you to think about ways in which your role as a writer and your hope for an audience in the United States, beyond the United States, and to an international world might be a way in which you would communicate your hopes and fears toward your audience.
That's such a great question.
It is a big question.
I think this is the case for so many writers, right? We sit down and we try to create a world that we want to imagine into existence, right? So we want to imagine a world. In the case of If You Come Softly, I wanted to imagine a world where that didn't happen to Jeremiah. Mm-hmm. And the way that I can imagine it is by taking myself and my reader through it, and then at the other end of that journey saying, okay, what can I do to change this? How do I have an impact on a better world, on a greater good? And because I love those characters and I want them to be safe. And so for a writer, the first thing I want to do is create those characters that people fall in love with and think of them in the bigger world and think of them in relation to ourselves. Mm-hmm. And then take it from there. I think the book is the beginning of the journey. And when you look at someone like Ibram X. Kendi's book, How to Be Anti-Racist, or Jason's rendition of it, Jason Reynolds' rendition of it, or even a book that I was recently reading, Me and White Supremacy, and I forget the author's name, which makes me crazy, but she's Muslim, and it's a brilliant and beautiful book about how to be anti-racist and what does white supremacy look like. And I think when we think of white supremacy, we think of the Klan, and we think of lynchings and all the stuff that happened in the past, but we have to look at it in the context of now, in the context of privilege, and what it means to have these white supremacist ideas of deserving something because of your birthright, or and I feel like for authors looking back at picture books are so great in that even if you can't read the words, you can look at the pictures and know the story and have the emotion and follow the journey. And I'm always encouraging people to read picture books for the rest of their lives, not just when they're young people. But I do think words have power and books have power, and they have the power to create change. And even though as writers we're not trying to be didactic or teach people anything, we really are trying to engage in a narrative that becomes a conversation.
Exactly. Thank you so much for stating that so well for us to understand. I'm so sorry that our time together today is so brief. I can only say to our Frankfurt Book Fair audience and others that there's a lot for us to know about our world. First and foremost, by reading, of course, all of your wonderful works, of which I have just a small sampling I've brought here today to show to our audience. 28 books here on my shelves. Many, many picture books, of course, of which we have just a few here to show you. But looking at your website, learning from your website, I thought about what you said in one of your answers to a question in which you said, why do you write? And you said, sometimes I have many questions and writing is the only way I can answer them. Mm-hmm. And to turn that around for all of us who are readers of your work and readers of other works, I have many questions. And sometimes reading is the only way I can answer them. So I hope that our audience, book fair people, all readers, that we will continue to read, that we will continue to seek, that we will continue to connect on a human level to each and every character you've introduced us to, each and every idea, issue, topic, whatever it is, to see the humanity of each person's experience. And for those who wish to find out more about the ideas of Black Lives Matter and that movement, to go to the website of the organization, to go to Facebook pages, Instagram, all these social media ways in which we can find out more, to read the books written by Ava Max Kendi, but also especially to hear the voice of Jason Reynolds, who speaks for young people, his audiobook in which he, with his own compelling voice, helps young people to understand more. I think we're very fortunate to live in a time when so much is accessible to us through literature. Thank you for your time today, Jackie.
Thank you, Junko. It's so great to see you. And thanks everyone for joining us.
Okay, thank you again. We hope to see more and more of each other through various means.
Thank you both. Now for the next topic, and it's also the last one, we will talk about also a very important matter, environment, with Sherri Aldis from the United Nations.
Hello, my name is Rachel. Welcome to the final segment of IBBY's Frankfurt session focused on the Sustainable Development Goals Book Club. The SDG Book Club uses books as a tool to encourage children to interact with the principles of the SDGs through a curated reading list of books. To discuss this wonderful project, I'm joined by Liz Page, Executive Director of IBBY, Sherri Aldis, Chief, United Nations Publications, and Michiel Kolman, Immediate Past President for the International Publishers Association and Presidential Envoy for Diversity and Inclusion. Welcome.
Thank you.
Let's get started. Liz, IBBY is an international network of people that are committed to bringing books and children together. In your perspective, what role do books play in helping to achieve the SDG goals?
Oh, thank you, Rachel. Yes. Well, I'll just give you a little bit about it. There's IBBY has 81 sections now worldwide, and all of them are working to bring children and books together. And since 2018, IBBY and the IPA have had a memorandum of understanding in which we have agreed to support each other's projects, etc., and in particular our advocacy activities. So when the book club was launched, it was obvious for the IPA to invite IBBY to be a partner in the SDG Book Club. Even though IBBY has members covering many more languages than the 6 required by the project, we felt that we could utilize our members' knowledge and experience to identify books to address these 17 themes of the Sustainable Development Goals. And IBBY members have acted as partners in the selection committee, and for each language group, and IBBY members worldwide have submitted titles that they felt reflect the topics we have. What I want to share now is something that the IBBY sections have been doing, and that is an exciting development there where they have selected and produced a beautiful catalogue of books from Latin America and the Caribbean. These reflect the 6 specific goals with the themes of climate change and environmental sustainability. The IBBY sections worked with Salalk to create this catalogue. You can see on the screen with the name Reading, Imagining and Acting. And the catalogue comprises 46 children's books from the regions and is a very good way of highlighting these themes. You can read more about this and download the catalogue from the IBBY website. We have it on our blog. We believe that every child everywhere in the world must have access to books and the opportunity to become a reader in the fullest sense. IBBY sees this as a fundamental right and the doorway to empowerment for every child. It's more than teaching literacy and entails becoming lifelong readers, one who can think critically, participate in activities and in the society, resist demagoguery, understand the world and know him or herself and know others. Books in this way help children make up their minds, discover the world, other ideas and cultures, and they act as windows and mirrors, looking outwards as well as reflections of their own lives. And through this book club, we can help them realize all the different ways that they can improve their lives and help their lives and share with others. Thank you.
Wonderful. I think it's really important to emphasize action. And I think perhaps, Sherri, you might want to share, what role do SDG book clubs play in inspiring children to take action?
Thank you, Rachel. Well, I think that first of all, the most important thing is by reading these books, they're actually already contributing directly to SDG number 4 on quality education. And then other than that, I think that the main role of books is really to inspire children, to capture their interest through these compelling stories, the attractive illustrations, and also to expose children, as Liz was saying, to other situations they might not be familiar with, other countries or cultures they might not know. And then stories also make things personal to children. These concepts are quite difficult. The words are even difficult, sustainable development goals. So I think that if it's personal rather than abstract or complicated, it's much easier for children to be inspired to take action. I also think that action is a natural next step for children once we have captured their interest. Children want to do things just naturally, and they're interested in issues that the SDGs cover, such as hunger, poverty, equality, and the environment. Children are very, very interested in taking action on all of these issues. I think another really important part of the club is being part of something together. The idea of a club is to do things with others, and that's the founding principle of the SDGs as well. We need to act together in order to achieve them. And so encouraging children and libraries and communities to create in-person before and now virtual spaces where we can discuss these topics and talk about the books and the issues behind them is a very important concept behind the SDG Book Club. And then in addition to the content of the book, where often actions are already described, even in novels, we do provide concrete examples to children in our interaction with them. So we send out emailings and communicate through social media with children who are members of the book club. And for each SDG, we provide them with concrete examples of things that they can do. So it's very important that these book selections be in all 6 official languages and others. I think Michiel will speak a little bit more about that later, so that they can be as accessible as possible and encourage children to take action in their local languages and communities.
Thanks, Sherri. And I think the book club got launched in 2019 during Michiel Kolman's presidency of the IPA. Michiel, since it sort of got launched, how has the concept developed?
Well, so the first major achievement, of course, is that almost on a monthly basis, we covered SDGs. And now we almost, I think, covered all 17 of them. So that's an achievement on its own. And we've done so in all the 6 UN languages. And there's room for improvement. We can expand even beyond that. So we've seen a beautiful new book club being launched in Bahasa Indonesia, plans in Norway, and very exciting also plans for a book club in the Portuguese language. So both very great in Brazil and in Portugal, etc., and around in the Lusophone world. And I even heard some rumors that there might even be a book club coming from Africa. So super exciting. And I also hope that the Dutch, my own country, will follow suit very soon. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, Michiel. And as a final word to wrap us up, Sherri, I mean, these children seem to be everywhere around the world tuning into the SDG Book Club. What's our hope? I mean, what's the ultimate aim for all of this action?
So basically we have 10 years left. We're in 2020. It's called the Agenda 2030. So we're now in what we call the Decade for Action, which was just launched last week at the UN. And so the young people of today will be adults by then. So this is really their agenda. It's their work. And we can already see a huge increase in youth activism. We have people like Greta Thunberg, like Malala, and many others that are spontaneously popping up all over the world, which is very inspiring for us. It's also holding us accountable, us as adults, as institutions like the United Nations and governments. They're holding us accountable for what we're doing because we hold their future in our hands for now. And we see that they are very motivated to impact positively on climate change, diversity, and other important issues, and asking us to take action now. Basically what we want them to do is to continue to do that. We want them to continue to raise their voices, to be heard, and to influence policymakers and individuals to take action now. We also want them to continue to demand a seat at the table. We have the Youth Envoy's office at the UN, and there are many other places. More and more young people are trying to run for office, for elected office. We want them around the table to influence the world that they will be in charge of tomorrow. And every individual can take small steps, including children. There are some very simple things that we can all do on a daily basis to contribute to the SDGs. We can all recycle, reuse, we can take a bike instead of taking the car, we can take a shower instead of taking a bath. Children are very, very sensitive to issues like helping others in need or standing up for those who are weaker than us. So there are so many of these simple acts that we can all take in our daily lives, starting with children, but also very relevant to each and every one of us. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sherri. I think the SDG Book Club's going from strength to strength. I'd like to thank the panelists. I think that's all we have time for. And I thank you all for joining us, and we'll hand back.
Thank you very much for that report on that topic. So that's already the end of our little show for Frankfurt Kids this year on the Digital Book Fair. But of course, that's just the opener for us. We hope that you will join us for the Digital Book Fair on some of the other things that we are doing at Buchmesse.de. Please meet us at the highlight page, Frankfurt Kids, where lots of our cooperation partners are presenting what they are doing. And you will find a lot of more interesting people there.
And thank you so much for listening to us. And we know it's only one of many long digital events, but I hope you liked it. And we hope, of course, that we will be able to see each other next year, physically this time in Frankfurt or somewhere else. And goodbye.
Goodbye, see you next year.